All right. Good morning, everyone. It's 1 minute past the hour, so we'll get underway. So thank you for joining us at this morning's public forum on the Essential Services Commission's draft decision on the 2025-26 Victorian Default Offer. My name is Jared Brodie, and I'm the chairperson of the Essential Services Commission. I'd like to start this morning's forum by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands across Victoria, wherever you are today. For me, I'd particularly like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present, and also extend that to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that may be joining us this morning. Before we get into the session, I'll make some introductions and also draw your attention to some housekeeping. So firstly, just be aware that we are recording this forum and we will publish it on our website. The recording will capture all the discussion and attendees, all the discussion and questions from attendees, including the Q&A portion later on in the meeting. We're looking forward to facilitating a dedicated question and answer session as part of today's forum. But of course, if you have any questions or comments that pop up during the various presentations, please type them in the Q&A box at the top of your screen, and so we can respond. You'll also have the option to submit questions anonymously. We have at this stage disabled microphones just to avoid feedback and background noise, but you will have the opportunity to unmute and ask questions during the Q&A session. We also remind business representatives attending the forum of their obligations under Australian competition law, and note there must be no discussion or comments, including in the Q&A, pertaining to market offer price changes during the session. I would like to introduce my fellow commissioners, senior leaders and commission staff in attendance today. If you could give a bit of a wave. We've got my fellow commissioner, Jess Young, in attendance. I believe Rebecca Billings is also online. Unfortunately, our fellow commissioner, Ellie Patira, is unable to join the session this morning. On behalf of my fellow commissioners, I would like to emphasise how pleased we are to be here today and hear directly from interested parties. I'm also joined by Marcus Crudden, our Executive Director of Price Monitoring and Regulation, and Craig Madden, who heads up our Transport and Victorian Default Offer teams. Mark and Craig are supported by the Victorian Default Offer project team, led by the project managers Meg Harris and Seda Khosrow-Shahi. Seda will be leading today's presentation on the draft decision. I'll be handing over to her shortly. We're all supporting the forum today because the Commission really values frank and transparent engagement with interested parties to inform our decision making. And I also would like to particularly welcome our guest presenters this morning. So thank you to Stephanie Tonkin from the Consumer Action Law Centre, and also Joe De Silva from the Australian Energy Council for joining us this morning. I'm really looking forward to your presentations as well and hearing your insights and views on the Victorian Default Offer. So I understand we have close to 50 attendees this morning, including customers, representatives from energy businesses, peak and industry bodies, embedded network services, and the community and consumer advocate sector. We also have observers joining us from different levels and departments within government, as well as other regulators, including the Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action and the Australian Energy Regulator. So warmly welcome to all of you today, and I'd like to encourage everyone to participate in the discussion. As well as your participation today, I just also remind you that we encourage written submissions to be made to us by 11th of April on the draft decision, and submissions can be made via the Engage Victoria platform. So just to quickly summarise the agenda today, so as I mentioned, Seda Khosrow-Shahi from the Commission will take you through our draft decision. Then we will hear from our guest speakers, Stephanie and then Joe. And after those presentations, we'll move into our Q&A session before wrapping up. The Q&A will be hosted by my fellow Commissioner, Jess Young. So before I do hand over to Seda, I just want to speak a little bit about customer impacts, energy and consumer rights protections, and the Commission's ongoing focus on making sure customers are aware of and getting available to all the support that they are entitled to. And just to confirm, the Commission understands the ongoing impact of proposed prices for Victorian Default Offer customers amid many people experiencing cost of living pressures. We know through our direct engagement with representatives from both the energy and the community sectors, many of you are on the call today, and through our work with local and state governments. And that's why upholding the rights and protections of energy customers remains front of mind for the Commission. Helping customers navigate the energy market is important to us, and we'll continue to remind all customers of their entitlements to support and assistance under our strong consumer protection framework. We know that through our own data that we collect and publish that there can be substantial savings for consumers if they're able to move to the retailer's best offer. And we continue to closely monitor how businesses are meeting their responsibilities to inform consumers about that option. Of course, we encourage consumers to log on to the Victorian Energy Compare website, compare.energy.vic.gov.au, to find out how much they can save by moving to another retailer. We also know that retailers play a really important role in helping customers understand what payment plans, concessions, rebates, and other grants they may be entitled or eligible for. They can provide practical, or retailers can also provide practical help to support customers reduce their energy usage and bills. Where necessary, we will use our full suite of regulatory tools to support and promote energy retailer compliance with critical safeguards that are in place to protect Victorian energy consumers. Just on this slide, it mentions our priorities for compliance priorities for 24-25, including disconnection for non-payment, the payment difficulty framework, and protecting customers experiencing vulnerability. Our priorities for 2025-26 are yet to be finalised, but we'll be in touch about those in due course. The upshot really is that we want to make sure Victorian energy consumers are getting all the assistance they are entitled to, and we do take enforcement action if we see businesses not meeting their obligations. So with that, I will now hand over to Seda to present our draft decision, and I look forward to observing the discussion this morning. Over to you, Seda.
Thank you, Jared. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our forum. In the next few slides, I will just take you through our draft decision on 25-26 Victorian Default Offer. The Commission reviews the Victorian Default Offer retail price annually, taking into account wholesale electricity cost, network cost, retail operating cost, environmental cost, as well as some other components such as other costs, network losses, retail operating margin, and finally GST. This year, our analysis showed that the cost to retailers of providing electricity will increase slightly, about $12 for domestic customers, mainly due to higher network costs, which is partially offset by lower wholesale cost and environmental cost. This is just the average cost. The actual cost obviously varies across different distribution zones. As you can see in this table, in this slide, the increase in network costs drives the overall increase in average bill. Higher network costs have been partly offset by decrease in wholesale and environmental costs and a small reduction in retail operating margin. The draft decision includes indicative network tariffs ahead of the Australian Energy Regulator's annual network tariff decision, which due in May 2025. The applied methodology is largely consistent with our last year decision. However, some key changes have been made. Specifically, we have excluded solar export from the load profile to determine wholesale electricity cost, and we have also reduced the retail operating margin. Overall, the Victorian default offer will increase slightly. The draft decision proposed an increase of less than 1% for the residential customers and less than 3% for small business customers. Under the draft decision, on average, across all 5 distribution zones, typical annual residential bill based on 4,000 kilowatt-hour consumption would increase from $1,655 to $1,677, which is about $12 increase. Typical annual small business bill, which is based on 10,000 kilowatt-hour usage, will increase from $3,530 to $3,633, which is an increase of $103. The next slide shows the variation estimated domestic Victorian default offer by distribution zone. As you can see, the changes ranging from a decrease of 1% in AusNet and PowerCo to increase of 5% in City Power. The change mainly reflect the variation in network costs across different distribution zones. And this slide shows the cost stack. As you can see from this graph, higher network costs are driving the increase in total cost stack, which is offset by decrease in wholesale and environmental costs and small reduction in retail operating margin. Please note that the impact on residential bill vary depending on electricity usage. This is just a breakdown for domestic household with an average annual consumption of 4,000 kilowatt-hour, with a typical bill increasing from 1,655 to 1,667, which is about $12 increase for a year. The next slide shows the same cost stack for small business customers with an average annual consumption of 10,000 kilowatt-hour, with a typical bill increasing from $3,530 to $3,633, which is an increase of $103. We will be monitoring all elements between the draft and final decision, and the final decision will be updated to reflect the latest information at the time. Some of the key updates will be to reflect the latest market data on wholesale electricity future contracts, and also for the final decision of Australian Energy Regulator on network tariff that will apply in 25 and 26. So here I'll take you through different components of the cost stack and approach on each item. For network costs, we have used indicative network tariff for 25-26 that network businesses submitted to Australian Energy Regulator in February. The increase in network costs is driven by updated cost of debt, cost pass-throughs, both approved and proposed reopener cost, and forecast transmission costs, as well as incentive scheme costs. For our final decision, we will use the tariff that's approved by Australian Energy Regulator. The next component is retail operating cost. We continue to apply the same cost to domestic and small business customers for our draft decision. There have been a slight increase since last video due to updated cost data, reflecting increase in labor costs, IT, customer service, and billing costs. The next cost component is wholesale electricity cost. We have largely maintained our approach, but made some key changes to the data we use. We decided to use a load profile reflecting customers' load or import only when estimating wholesale cost. We asked for views on a change to our load profile in our request for comment paper late last year, and we have considered the submissions we received as well as our economic consultant Frontier Economics advice. This approach aligned with the AER's approach to setting wholesale costs in the default market offer. The change in load profile has led to a reduction in wholesale costs, mostly for domestic customers and those in regional Victoria who have high solar uptake. We are consulting in our draft decision on how to account for the wholesale cost of solar export in future Victorian default offer, and we would like to hear from you on this matter. For our final decision, we will update the 12-month reading period to mid-April from 16th of January that's used in the draft decision. The next cost item is environmental cost. Overall, environmental costs have decreased slightly from 24-25. The cost of complying with Commonwealth schemes like the large-scale renewable energy target and small-scale renewable energy scheme have decreased, which is reflecting a change in liability percentage. The social cost of carbon components of the feed-in tariff has increased, reflecting increased installation and larger systems that's contributing to higher solar export volume. We will continue to account for this cost while the legislation requires it. In terms of Victorian Energy Upgrade Program, Victorian energy efficiency certificate prices have continued to increase since 24-25, which is reflected in the 12-month rolling average of $102 estimated in our draft decision. In our request for comments paper, we sought feedback on the way we estimate the cost to retailers to comply with the VU program. We heard concerns from retailers about their rising certificate prices and support for us investigating our approach. We collected the trade weighted average certificate prices paid by a sample of retailers over the 23-24 period. The information we collected showed that the average price paid and our estimate are approximately the same. We have continued our approach for using the most recent 12-month of trade-weighted certificate prices, which is $102. That resulted in $62 in typical domestic annual bill. The next cost component is modest cost for customer acquisition and retention. The pricing order requires us to include modest cost for customer acquisition and retention. Our position is that an efficient price benchmark that is broadly available and used as a comparator price should include in the amount for this cost. Our approach has unchanged. The benchmark has been updated for inflation. The next item is retail operating margin. We have considered benchmark retail operating margin across other jurisdictions, the expected return approach, and the actual margin. We have reduced the retail margin to 5% in 25-26 from 5.3% in 24-25 decision. So this was basically our draft decision on 25-26 Victorian Default Offer. This slide shows the next steps. We invite interested parties to make submission to the draft decision. We welcome both general comments and formal submissions. You can make submissions on Engage Victoria or send them to us directly via email. The final date for the submission is Friday, 11th of April. This was our draft decision. I would like now to introduce Stephanie Tonkin, Chief Executive Officer at the Consumer Action Law Centre, which is a campaign-focused consumer advocacy organization based in Melbourne. Over to you, Stephanie.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me to present this morning. I'll just go on to the next slide. Thank you. So just very briefly about Consumer Action Law Centre. We're a consumer advocacy organisation and we develop and evidence our policy and campaigns through our statewide frontline services. We operate the National Debt Helpline in Victoria, which helps people experiencing financial difficulty, including energy hardship. And we also deliver a statewide consumer legal advice line as well, and pick up all of that evidence and insights and use that in our policy and campaigning work. Next slide, please. So just really briefly, a few general reflections on the draft decision. We welcome that the VDO has stayed almost the same, increasing by less than 1%. The VDO is continuing, in our view, to serve its purpose of safeguarding consumers by providing a simple, trusted and reasonable electricity price for Victorians. While we are supportive of the purpose of the VDO, we note that increasing energy prices in the wider market continue to have significant impacts on Victorians in energy hardship who are contacting us, the National Debt Helpline, for assistance. As an organisation delivering the NDH in Victoria, we are relieved we didn't see a significant increase in the cost this year. That said, and I'll come to this at the end, more is needed to reduce energy hardship in Victoria, which really does stretch out beyond the VDO that we're talking about today. Next slide, please. I wanted to start by sharing some observations on what we're seeing on the front lines in this cost of living crisis that we are still in. Demand for our services, so for our financial counselling services in particular, continues to grow alongside energy prices in years. Figures on the screen are for callers to the National Debt Helpline, specifically calling with energy hardship as one of the issues. Often one, and I've spoken about this at previous forums, when people are presenting with energy hardship, it's probably in a grab bag of a whole lot of other issues like housing arrears, be it mortgage or rent, other credit card debts, and a whole range of other issues. So energy hardship can be just one of many issues that a caller is presenting with. And what energy hardship looks like for us is people being unable to afford supply, and that can be on top of an old energy debt that they simply can't move. People cutting back on energy use in ways that impact their quality of life, spending time in bed to avoid using heaters, or weighing up energy costs against food costs. A client called us last year and she'd been with the same retailer for 10 years and she was never assisted to switch to the best offer. And she presented to us with a $20,000 energy debt and she was calling us for help to sell her home to repay that energy debt. So energy debt can make up a really significant proportion of someone's hardship and can even impact into their housing. Energy hardship, and specifically energy debt, is the third most frequent presenting issue on the National Debt Helpline in the current 24-25 financial year. And so therefore, providing a stable anchor for affordable essential services is paramount during this cost of living crisis. Next slide, please. Of those callers to the National Debt Helpline, we've observed some trends and systemic issues in their interactions with their energy retailer. And here's a few of the key trends that we've picked out. And in this context, I also want to underline the importance of retailers meeting their obligations to customers at risk of or experiencing payment difficulty, in addition to obligations on retailers to inform their customers about best offer. Trends we see on the National Debt Helpline, unaffordable payment plans are continuing. That can be between $150 or $200 per fortnight. Most callers we have interviewed about payment assistance noted that they weren't offered better offers by their retailer. And callers experiencing extreme hardship and vulnerability who asked their retailers to waive a debt were told no, they have to speak to a financial counsellor before accessing any assistance. So these are the broader issues that we're hearing about on our front lines, and I'll return to some of these when we talk about the broader picture of energy hardship shortly. But I'll now, on the next slide, turn to the draft decision itself. And I've put a selfless plug here of one of our reports, which looked at data from 2023 at the front line of the cost of living crisis, and energy hardship did play a big part in that report too. But as I've said, against this background, the VDO continues to be of importance in ensuring a simple, trusted and reasonable electricity price for Victorians. And we saw some positive aspects of this decision from the consumer perspective. The retail operating margin, we support the approach in attempting to balance relief for consumers struggling with cost of living pressures against retailers making a reasonable return, reducing the proportion of retail operating margin in the 25-26 VDO to 5% or average of $4. We see this as the lowest proportion of retail operating margin in any VDO price. And so we are supportive. As well, the reduction in environmental costs. We welcome that reduced cost by 9% or $13 compared to 24-25. And we do support the ESC's decision to maintain their approach in estimating environmental costs as part of retailers' compliance with environmental obligations and taking into account actual reduced costs. As an aside to this, it does remain crucial that Australian consumers can lower their energy costs by transitioning to renewable energy, and this should remain a key priority in the Victorian government's energy transition, including via the Victorian Energy Upgrades Program. The mixed aspects that we've identified in the decision for consumers, the retail operating costs. We note that the retail operating costs have increased by 4% in this decision, and however, this is notably lower than the DMO. While we remain supportive of the approach to set the benchmark using customer-weighted average of actual retail operating costs, we do hope to see the costs decrease in future decisions. It is also worth, as the draft decision lays out, it's worth the ESC continuing to interrogate this through modelling or comparison against other benchmarks, as any cost increases need to be justifiable and should definitely not include re-recovering of costs. And finally, we note that what is the market average may not always equate to what's efficient. And I guess that's the challenge that the ESC has to navigate. And customer acquisition and retention costs, I'll keep raising this in these talks that I give. While the customer acquisition and retention costs have increased slightly, it is positive that the CARC in the video is lower than both the Victorian and national average, in line with the CARC costs in the video being modest. However, we continue to oppose the methodology, including customer acquisition and retention costs. By definition, customers are not engaging with marketing when they're sitting on the default offer. Telemarketing costs are incorporated, but these are banned in Victoria. Comparison websites, apart from the Victorian Government independent website, are fraught. There's a recent Choice research article which uncovered how some of these websites contain inherent conflicts of interest. None of this serves to promote the purpose of the VDO as a simple, trusted and reasonable energy price. And we do hope that these considerations can be taken into account in removal of the CARC from the methodology. I also note that updated ACCC figures that 38% of customers are sitting on offers that are more expensive than the default offer, so clearly not responding to best offer marketing. And finally, I've put network costs down there as the final point, while we're not weighing in strictly on the network cost pass-through methodology. However, this is the part of the picture that does cause us real concern. Network costs make up the largest component of the cost stack and continue to rise as ongoing investment is needed to keep infrastructure working and supporting energy consumers across the state. We can't see the cost increases abating anytime soon, and we of course don't want the infrastructure to break down. But fundamentally, a growing number of Victorians simply can't afford their energy, and this is where I turn to the structural problems that the VDO can't solve. So next slide, please. So as I've said, the VDO remains an important safeguard for customers unable or unwilling to engage in the market, so long as they can engage enough to get onto the VDO, or it serves as a cap for other plans. I recall Marcus last year on a certain segment of the cost stack saying we're splitting hairs a little bit, and I think that's right. If we remove the CARC, which I think we should, that's a $46 saving. People are presenting to the NDH, National Debt Helpline, with energy debt in the hundreds, even thousands of dollars. So if we're to address the underlying energy poverty, we need to explore alternative methodologies that will provide an affordable energy option for those who need it. And this is separate and in addition to the VDO. Consumer Action supports the ESC's call out in the draft decision for the Victorian government to potentially investigate the development of a social tariff for low-income households. This doesn't have to be a direct subsidy. There are a myriad of ways that a social tariff can be developed, and research is needed on the best approach for Victoria and Australia. The cost stack and the deep analysis of Victorian energy pricing that sits behind the VDO is a good starting point for the research. Network costs being distributed on a different model, such as more of a user pay model, is just one of many options that could be considered. And of course, we can look to other parts of the world, what's worked, what hasn't, what are the byproducts. There are also other reforms that can meaningfully assist people doing it tough. We continue to recommend the Department of Social Services fast-track automation of concessions, some level of automation of utility relief grants in partnership with Victorian Government and the ESC is needed urgently. We are still hearing of people not accessing concessions or grants of relief that they are entitled to through simple failures of communication. And we support the development and implementation of a positive consumer duty to ensure, among other things, that retailers are providing customers fair and honest prices and preventing thousands of Victorians languishing on bad deals. So thank you again for the opportunity to give some reflections from the National Debt Helpline and what we're seeing in energy hardship in Victoria.
Thank you, Stephanie. Really appreciate that. I would now like to introduce Joe De Silva from the Australian Energy Council. The Australian Energy Council is the peak industry body for electricity businesses operating in competitive retail energy market, including those businesses operating in Victoria. Over to you, Joe.
Thank you very much. Look, thank you very much for having me today, and I'm happy for you to move to the next slide, please. So this is just a brief outline of the Australian Energy Council. I won't go into this in incredible detail, but just to say that our members generate and sell energy to over 10 million homes and businesses, and they're major investors in renewable energy generation. So if you could move to the next slide, please. So the Australian Energy Council believes that the Essential Services Commission's draft decision should act as an important reminder for households and businesses to shop around for better electricity deals. Customers looking to save money shouldn't wait for the new Victorian Default Offer, which will come into effect on 1st of July. Customers should check online or ring their retailer because there are more competitive deals available. So it's quick and easy to find and switch to a cheaper market offer today using the government comparison website Victorian Energy Compare. Retailers also inform customers if they are on their best deal and how much they can save by switching. And it really does pay to check the competitive market. It's really important to remember that the regulated prices are designed to be a safety net for the 13% of Victorians who are on the VDO. While they are not the cheapest deals in the market, the risk with default prices is many people think or may think they're the best option. So that's why we encourage people to shop around. If you could move to the next slide, please. So I just want to talk briefly about a project which we've been engaging in at the AEC for over the last year. So it's part of our CER integration strategy, which is a consumer energy resource strategy. And the role of retailer project looks at what the role of the retailer would be if there were a lot of consumer energy resources in the market. So when we actually did commence this project, we started looking at what a future customer might look like. Next slide, please. And we did quite a lot of research around publicly available material, and we also talked to our member retailers. And we found that there are some shared needs and values amongst all customers. So they're listed on this slide, and we have shared needs like simplicity, affordability, fairness and equity, some of the concepts that we've heard about today. And what we would like to say is that all customers will want their essential needs and values met. Next slide, please. However, there are also increasing opportunities for customers to be rewarded for their participation in the market. And this slide talks about some of the opportunities which are emerging for customers. So that includes dynamic network pricing, emerging consumer energy resource technologies, set and forget devices, and a whole range of other things. And these include energy market policy reforms. So with this in mind, we encourage customers to seek out the many innovative offers in the market which best suit their situation. Next slide, please. This slide actually represents the different parts of an average electricity bill. So the different colours represent the different parts. And you can see the two blue components or parts of the pie actually are made up of wholesale and network costs. So there are basically, broadly speaking, 4 types of costs in a bill. So there's the wholesale and network, which you can see are the largest parts of the bill. And then there's the retail and environmental costs. So the blue part of the bill is around 80% of a customer's power bill. And it's the cost of generation and the cost of the poles and wires. Now, retailers pass these costs on to customers, and they're just a straight pass through from either the wholesale or the network side directly into the retail bill. So as we've heard today, the draft VDO decision expects household prices to be less than 1% higher on average from 1 July. The latest decision reflects increasing network costs for the poles and wires used to deliver electricity. So I think whilst we've heard today on this conversation, we've heard calls to lower the retail sides of the bill. We believe that there's strong effort that needs to be made and attention placed on the network side of the bill. And advocates really need to look closely at what the AER is deciding with these network costs and really consider whether such a big component of the bill should go, in a way relatively unscrutinised compared to the retail element. So we really think that it's important to focus on the increasing network costs and really pay very close attention to those. And there may be a temptation to squeeze the retail side of the bill. We've heard today the discussion about the CARC and removing the CARC, but that's only ever going to be a short-term solution for what is a much bigger problem, which is that we're moving to higher network costs as the energy transition continues. And you can only ever squeeze a small part of the retail bill. And if the network bill continues to grow, then that will be of concern to customers. I did also just want to say that the CARC is really important for the 87% of customers who are not on the VDO. And the competitive market plays a really important role for these customers, being able to shop around, find the competitive market offers that are available to them. So we would strongly urge the ESC to maintain its methodology in relation to the CARC. Next slide, please. So there are some key issues which we will be turning our attention to. The exclusion of solar PV exports is one of them. We will engage more closely with our members and generate an AEC position on this. The retail operating margin and the reduction that we've seen is a major concern for the AEC. And this is especially so when we consider that the ESC has a comparatively lower retail operating costs and CARC to the DMO. So the ESC has highlighted that it has on balance placed a greater weighting on cost of living. Arguably, the role of the regulator should be to set efficient prices and let governments make public policy decisions about affordability and how prices should be subsidised. We don't believe that this should be the role of an economic regulator. We also consider that the other key ESC reason of drawing on the rates in Tasmania and ACT is not appropriate. The market characteristics of Victoria are very different to the other two states. Notwithstanding, it's hard to justify the magnitude of the difference between the DMO and VDO. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to briefly talk about the Victorian Energy Upgrades Program. And as noted in the presentation earlier today, the certificate price is much higher in Victoria than in other states. You can see the light grey line represents the VEEC price. So we welcome discussion with the Commission, both on the level at which the VEEC is set in the VDO, but also a series of recommendations that the AEC is going to make about the VEU program. So the AEC is participating in the strategic review of the VEU, and whilst we do think it has a really meaningful role to play to help Victoria's economy decarbonise, we have seen the scheme encounter significant challenges in recent years, and we're really concerned about the mismatch between supply and prescribed demand, which has reduced market liquidity and seen certificate prices in Victoria rise dramatically. So some of the recommendations that we're going to be proposing to set up an enduring and least cost VEU program include reference to supporting energy affordability for customers being placed in the objectives of the VEET Act, investigating further how some new activities without a clear energy saved value can fit neatly in an energy efficiency scheme, and replace the current emissions reduction certificate metric with an energy saved metric. So these are just some of our considerations about how VEEC costs could be lowered. We would really like to talk to the ESC and other parties, including advocates, to get support for these recommendations. We welcome discussion with the Commission on them. While we recognise the recommendations are outside of the VDO settings, we do really think that it's an important part of the overall conversation around the VDO. So thank you very much for having me present today, and we look forward to continuing the discussion.
Thank you very much, Jo, for that presentation. We certainly really appreciate you taking the time to be here and to provide the insights that you have. It's a really useful part of the process for us in working on the video. Now, we'll move right into the question and answer session this morning, and we've had a couple of questions pop in, I think, which we'll start with, but just wanted to give you a reminder that the process for asking a question, we've got a couple of ways you can do it. You can use the Q&A window button and type your question in, or you can also raise your hand and we'll respond to you via the camera. You can pop your camera on and you're welcome to ask the question verbally as well. Now we are looking to consolidate questions if we get quite a few. So if we do get some similar questions, we'll answer in one go, and we might limit those that are outside the scope of the video today. But you're always welcome to send further questions or comments through to our inbox. And if you can see the inbox email address just there on the screen. And this is just a reminder on how to use the functions in Teams to ask the question. So you can see there either the Q&A button or the hand raising button, which we're probably all very familiar with by now, but always good to have a reminder. Okay, so we might move on to the first question. So I think the first question that has been asked by Shelby McFarlane Hill, and this is a broad question about hardship and energy equity. So I'll just read it out. So she says, completely agree with Steph's earlier point in that the issue of hardship and energy equity is far reaching and goes well beyond the default offer, as this mechanism is intended to be a safety net for disengaged consumers. Is the ESC looking to address equity concerns across the wider Victorian government? Where combined with other programs such as concessions or rebates, more could be done to assist hardship customers or those experiencing payment difficulty rather than those who are less engaged. This is a comment and a question, I think, and the question part to the ESC is really about what are we doing more broadly to address the equity issues and some of the things that Steph raised, drawing on really important insights that she's gained from her work in with the different hotlines that the Calc operate. I'd say that broader equity concerns, we are very focused on the operation of the retail market and the regulatory framework that exists around it. And if people are not aware, we're actually currently undertaking a review of the Energy Retail Code of Practice, and there's some really interesting reforms that are being considered as part of that, a lot of which go to how do we support more vulnerable consumers. We're in the process at the moment of considering those reforms and developing up a draft position and including a regulatory impact statement for some of the reforms. And so although it's not really part of today's story around the VDO, I would suggest that people have a look at that, and because that's where we're focusing our efforts at the moment in terms of trying to address those equity concerns, as well as the ongoing work that we do through the VDO. But I might just see whether Steph would like to add anything to that response, given it sort of strays into her area.
Oh, thanks. Just actually think you've covered it really well. I agree, and we're very keen to see what reforms do come through the review of the ERCOP. But the point is that we have a real problem on our hands. It's not getting better; it's getting worse, and that's why VDO is serving its purpose, and it's a piece of the overall puzzle. But it feels, certainly from the people we're speaking to day in, day out, that the pressure is mounting, and we need something of a release valve, and we need to start thinking creatively. So yeah, really looking forward to working on those ERCOP reforms.
Thanks very much, Steph. We might move on then to the second question, which is in the chat box, which is from David Prinz. So thank you, David. So, and this is really similarly related. I'll just read it out. So Steph Tonkin presented that including the customer acquisition and retention costs, or CARC, in the video is unfair and it should be removed. What is the ESC's response? What would it take for CARC to be removed from the DMO in the final decision for 2025-26? Our response to this one is twofold. So the first part, David, is, and I'm sure you're probably very familiar with this, but the order that the ESC operates under, which sets out the framework which we must follow for the VDO and is set by the Victorian Government, requires that we include an amount for the customer acquisition and retention costs, and that it be a modest amount. So I guess technically, for us to stop doing that, we would need to first of all see a change to that pricing order, and that would need to be a decision of the Victorian Government to change that. I guess secondly, and we've indicated this in our draft decision, it's important to consider what the VDO is. It's both a safety net for those customers who are unable to or unwilling to engage in the market, but it's also a really important benchmark for the rest of the market. And it's in that benchmark role that the VDO plays that CARC becomes important, because, as you know, the VDO is needs to be a fair price for consumers and represented based on the efficient costs of a retailer. Now, it's our view that the efficient costs of a retailer do include overall some costs for customer acquisition and retention, and that's why it's appropriate that it be included, and particularly for that benchmark cost. Might see if there's anyone else who wants to add to that comment. Potentially not.
I'm happy to, Jess. Thanks.
Thanks, Jo. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think it's really important. As retailers, we certainly understand the cost of living issues that some customers are experiencing at the moment. And, retailers certainly go over and above their regulatory obligations in supporting customers who are having payment difficulty. And, there's many examples of additional things that retailers do to support customers. But at the same time, I think it's really important that retailers can actually cover their costs. And, the fact is that retailers operate in a competitive environment, and this delivers lots of benefits for customers, including the ability for customers to access cheaper deals than the VDO. And so as I said at the beginning, we really encourage customers to shop around. And if customers can't do that, we are very open to customers coming to retailers through their financial counsellor, and then accessing the support they need and getting the better offers that are available. Energy retailers do support financial counselling and other types of customer assistance. They're currently providing additional funding to financial counselling nationwide, and we do really see an important role for those supports being given to customers.
Thanks for that, Jo. Might see, Steph, did you want to add to that, respond to that comment? No.
Yeah, look, just really briefly, just informed by what we very often see, callers to the National Debt Helpline have tried to engage with their retailer but haven't been provided. I think there's a really broad range of experience out there in dealing with retailers, particularly when customers are in hardship. And I think by definition, people aren't switching. You've got 38% of people on deals more expensive than the VDO, and the VDO isn't the lowest price either. So when we're speaking to people, and I talked at length about this last year, the idea that a rational person, the idea that people are rational is fraught in itself, but also that people have the time and capacity and capability to call up and engage and try to switch and try to find the best deal for them. That is not always the case for a lot of people. People are working additional jobs. People need to do this on energy, insurance, their mortgage, their phone bill. People just don't have the capability, capacity, the bandwidth to be able to do this year in, year out as well. So while best offer pricing is really important and we must get the most out of that initiative and requirement, I think we can't just put all our eggs in that basket, because what we're seeing, again, on the front line is a very different story, that people are languishing on really poor deals.
Thanks very much for that, Steph. And yeah, that is something that we're really closely looking at through the COP review again. So thanks for raising it. We've got a couple of other things that have come through. So there's an anonymous comment there about the VEU program and the review, and a question for us about the extent of the ESC review. So I'd just like to clarify, the review is a broader government review. It's a strategic review of the Victorian Energy Upgrades program. We're participating in the review and certainly focusing on it, but yeah, it's not actually an ESC review. It is broad and it's looking at sort of a whole range of objectives, including, how the scheme can both be improved in its operation, but also how it can be expanded to promote electrification and other the future sort of energy policy. So I do encourage you to have a look at that. It's if you're interested, there's there's a consultation paper that was released a month or so ago, and a fair bit more information online. I might now go to Laurie Carr, who's got his hand up. Thanks for being patient, Laurie. Did you want to switch? Are you comfortable to switch your camera on and ask your question? Oh, are you there, Laurie? Might be having technical issues. I'll pause that one and go to another. A couple of questions that have been posted just recently, I think by Giuseppe. So Giuseppe has asked, so given the huge impact of monopoly network costs rising faster than inflation for many years now, while wholesale costs, which are contestable and market driven, and the ESC being stuck with the AMO pricing sent down for network costs, what can the ESC do to cap these costs? Yep, we're very cognizant of rising network costs and the processes by which those are set. So I'm sure most people here would be aware that the network, the costs of the network are actually regulated by the Australian Energy Regulator through their determinations, and certainly we're very interested observers of that process, but it's not a price, it's not a component of the cost stack that we have a role in determining the efficient costs of. That is the AER, and there are a bunch of different drivers in the network space that have contributed to that rising costs. We're certainly concerned by it and observe, and we do have some functions that are in the network space, but certainly not in that overarching determination of network costs that get passed through the VDO. I might just look at the next question from Giuseppe, which is, why are retailers allowed to publish discounts when their prices aren't based on the VDO, but some dodgy price they make up? I've seen a discount offered to be via the website, so the Compare Energy website, where the base price was nearly 20% higher than the VDO for peak electricity and 25% higher than for off-peak. The offer was 27% off, so only a 2% to 7% discount. Yeah, that's an interesting comment. Thank you, Giuseppe. So there is a requirement for retailers to publish their market offers with reference to the video, and that's that important role that the video plays as a benchmark price in the market. But it is importantly, it's not actually a price cap. So you know, there are retailers are free to offer market offers that are above the video. You know, that's you know, how the market functions. However, they are required to advertise with reference to the video. I would say that most market offers are actually below the video, and it is, as a number of pretty much every speaker today has encouraged consumers to have a look at, to go out and explore the offers that are available out there, because most people can save money looking at the latest offers, and so it's really important. Yeah, information is really important. I can see we've got one more hand up. Just Con.
Yeah, hi, how are you? It's Con from Red. Look, I've just got a quick question. You have historically accounted for load and exports when in your profiles, your customer load profiles when forecasting energy. So my understanding is that has been a consistent methodology applied over a number of years. But all of a sudden, you've actually changed your methodology. Now, that's something that retailers kind of have a bit of an issue with. We like consistency and predictability in rules. So could you just kindly just explain what it is that has changed? Are you simply relying on advice by your advisors, or is something sort of changed that has made you change? That's all.
Yeah, thank you very much for this question, Con. You're right, we have made a change. And the trigger for this change has actually been the availability of some new data. So in years gone past, we relied on data from AEMO that did not separate out import and export data on customer load. It was just a single data set. We're now, you know, thanks to more information, AEMO's been able to provide a different set of data. So we can now separate exports and imports, and we now have a good sort of 3-year historical average of that data set, which has meant that we were able to have a good look at that and think about whether we might be able to change to get to a load profile that better reflects what the purpose of the video, and better reflects the wholesale cost to retailers. So we have decided to make a change in the draft decision, and we're inviting stakeholders to provide comments on that. And we've put some reasons for our decision into the draft decision. But fundamentally, the load-only export profile does better reflect the cost to a retailer and the overall cost, the wholesale cost of electricity, and that's because the wholesale cost of exports is actually reflected in the feed-in tariff and separately. And what we see is that with a lower, with removing the exports, sort of results in an overall lower wholesale electricity cost for consumers. So we have, we've had a good look at it. I'd encourage you to have a look at our decision and the reasons that we've put in there, and I'm happy to sort of talk a bit further if there are further questions on that.
But it sounds like to me it's the feed-in tariff that's where those exports were covered. That's what you seem to be saying. And just to be clear.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right,
yeah,
that's it. Yeah, just want to understand that clearly. Thank you.
No problem. It is a very complex issue, and you're right, we have received advice from our advisors, Frontier Economics, on this topic. So yeah, there's quite a bit of material there to have a look at.
That's great. Thank you for the,
No problem. I can see there's a whole bunch of there's a new question online, and also Laurie has put his hand up again. Laurie, are you still there? Might be having technical difficulties. We'll go to the question in the chat then from Paul. So why has the default feed-in tariff reduced from 3.3 cents per kilowatt to just 0.4 cents and almost 88? So this is a question about the feed-in tariff. Look, I might take that one and just say that we obviously made a final decision on the feed-in tariff recently as well, and I'd encourage you to have a look at that. But today we're really focusing on the VDO. Are there any other questions, team? No, I think that might be it for now. Laurie, would you be interested in typing your question if you're having difficulty with the microphone, or either send it through via email? Like I said before, we're very happy to receive anything in writing. Well, I might pause there. I think we might have reached the end, and I'll pass back to Jared. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Jess, and thanks to everyone who provided questions and comments. It was really great to have those presentations as well. I heard from from Steph that there are people still affected by higher electricity bills and some people cutting back on energy use, and she raised some issues to do with continued scrutiny on retail operating costs and that concern around network costs remaining high, but also suggesting alternate policies outside the VDO, such as social tariffs or automation of concessions, and was mentioned our review of the Energy Retail Code of Practice. And we also heard from Joe a really helpful reminder to shop around. VDO is just the safety net, and people can get opportunities for rewards in the market, and the opportunities for rewards and saving is increasing. Joe also reminded us that there needs to be a focus and effort on the network side of the bill, and that the AEC does have concerns around the retail margin, and they will provide submissions around that, and also with respect to the Victorian Energy Upgrades Program, and we'll make various recommendations to the review there as well. We also had questions from the audience on addressing equity concerns. We had a discussion around the cost acquisition and retention costs, and remembering that there is the pricing order that requires that that be included, and that's a decision for government. There was also discussion around network costs and the fact that those network costs are set by the Australian Energy Regulator, and the VDO passes them through we pass them through to the VDO. And there was also a question around some market offers which are higher than the VDO. The VDO isn't a price cap, but we do know that most market offers are lower. And the final discussion there was around new data informing a change to how we've calculated wholesale costs, and that's been supported by external expert advice as well. So it was really valuable to hear firsthand those issues and questions that have been raised today, and we will consider them all very closely as we prepare for our final decision. And thanks particularly to Steph and Joe for your presentations and insights you've shared. Thanks also to the commissioners, to Jess for fielding the Q&A, to all the commission staff who put today's session together. If you haven't already done so, we encourage you to make comments or a formal decision to our draft decision by the 11th of April via Victorian Engage Victoria, and that will lead then, as the slide suggested, into our final decision by the 26th of May for new prices to start by the 1st of July. If you do have any queries, comments, feedbacks on today's session, or you couldn't get the Q&A function or your hand up to work, please do get in touch with the VDO team by emailing us at video@esc.vic.gov.au. Well, thank you everyone for taking the time to attend the forum, and I wish you a great rest of your day.